It's that favorite time of year or week, rather. It really is weekly rankings with AJ Black. Weekly reads and rankings where we read your comments as well as go through the top five best teams of the ACC and in the top, they could do better ACC teams. We're going to talk about that and maybe why the Atlantic Division could be a little ticked off with these recent TV views from their fans.
You are Locked On ACC, your daily podcast on the Atlantic Coast Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to today's edition of Locked On ACC. I'm your host, Candace Cooper, joined by AJ Black of Locked On Boston College. Each and every Wednesday, we give you weekly reads and rankings, reading your best comments here from our YouTube page, as well as talking through some of the best and worst teams around the conference. And so, without further ado, AJ Black, welcome to the show once again. Thanks so much for being here.
Hey, Candace, it's a very different feel from last week from my perspective, but I'm glad to be back.
It was a little down, sad Sally, but I'm so glad that you got to pick up an ACC win.
Look, it wasn't the prettiest game, and Phil Dracovic made one of the stupidest throws I've ever seen in my life, or whatever the hell that was. But it's a win's a win, and get out the schneid and get ready to play Clemson this week.
100%. If you guys have had the opportunity to listen to any of this week's show so far, you would definitely hear Kenton Gibbs and I talk about the fact that Louisville is, if there was ever a team you shouldn't lose to this season, Boston College would definitely be it. And no offense, AJ, but we just had to rip because there's no reason why Louisville should have lost that game.
Oh, man. BC had 13 penalties, 3 turnovers, and they were trying to hand the ball back to Louisville, and Louisville said,
Literally.
Not interested. We're going to lose this game for you.
No doubt about it. So let's get right into it. Let's talk about the 5 teams that are struggling here just a bit. Top 5 lowest teams, rather, that we always like to go through. So if you are listening for the first time, know that we talk about 5 and 5. So if your team is somewhere in the middle, you've made it clean through this week's event. So AJ, who we got 5th? Let's start with number 5.
I'm going to go with Virginia Tech.
Okay.
They're going to stay at the bottom. They have their one win which was against BC, and they got absolutely housed by NC State, UNC this week. Yeah. And at the beginning of the season, I said that Pry had a big rebuild in front of him, and he had that big win over BC, which looks irrelevant as the season goes on, but it's more and more clear that they don't have what they need to take that next step. And, with the rest of the conference, especially some other teams having some big wins so far. Yeah. I mean, the quality of win for me puts them at the bottom.
Yeah, the horses are definitely not in the stable, and it'll be interesting to see how he recruits going into this offseason, especially with this transfer portal thing being such a popular notion these days. So hoping he can get some more dogs and probably have we'll just chalk this year up, being the year 1 and figuring things out, and we'll be back in the groove in Blacksburg. So number 4, what we got?
I got UVA.
Virginia, the state of Virginia.
The state of Virginia is in last place right now for me.
That's crazy.
I don't know if you got to hear any of Tony Elliott's comments today, but he is like, I don't want to say that he's throwing his team under the bus, but he's being very critical of his team, saying they're not playing together. They're not, working as a unit. They're way too talented to be playing as bad as they are right now. And they are bad. They're bad. They're a bad team. Brennan Armstrong, is averaging like 140 yards per game or some absurdly low number. Yeah. They're 0-2 in conference. They got smoked by Duke. They get to play Louisville. We'll talk about in a second, in a game which could kind of determine Scott Satterfield's future, in my opinion.
1,000%, because if you lose to not only Boston College but Virginia in this year consecutively, yeah, buddy, you got to pack it. I don't care how good of a recruiter you are. Ain't no way. Just no possible way I could have faith in you. But more than that, going back to Tony Elliott, yeah, you don't have a team gelling, but whose fault is that at the end of the day? To me, right. y'all ain't doing the icebreakers. Y'all ain't doing the running in the, my favorite movie, Remember the Titans. Y'all ain't running in the forest in the rain. Like, y'all, clearly that's a coaching issue. And if you're not saying after all of that, all of those comments, if you're not saying at the end, but that's on me and I will do better as a coach and as a leader, then I look at that as, all right, let me tilt my head a little bit, because if you're just used to having 4 to 5 stars, like, okay, that's great. A monkey could coach them, but I'm trying to see what you can do in adversity. So let me see that.
Duke had nothing last year, and look what they're doing this year. That's all buying into a culture, buying into a program, and executing on the field. UVA had arguably way more talent. I mean, they have Brennan Armstrong, who was all ACC third team, I believe. And they look like garbage. They look like utter crap out there. And that's on Elliott. He's going to figure that out.
And I think it also shows just how good of a coach Bronco Mendenhall was. And that switch and transition wasn't as smooth as we're coming to see, right? As much as he, decided to step down all the things, which is, of course, appropriate for you and your mental health and all of that. I think Tony Elliott, I think people assume Tony Elliott was going to be the instant answer because of his pedigree. It is very apparent that it's going to take some time, but here we are.
Oh, look at both. I mean, both former Clemson coordinators are struggling out there. I mean, Venables is 3-2, but it's Oklahoma, and you can't lose 2 games. You know what I mean? You can't lose by 30 to TCU.
Absolutely not. When I looked at the score, sorry to go on a slide here, but I just this can't be Oklahoma and it can't be TCU. There's just no way. You might have some close ones that don't go your way, but not a 30-point blowout. That's just insane.
I need to get into Locked On Big 12 because I'm really interested in hearing about Kansas and TCU and all. It's just a crazy conference this year, and everything is flipped on its head, and it's
for sure
fascinating.
Shout out to the homie Josh Neighbors. If you guys have not checked out his pod, he does great things over there. All right, number 3.
All right, Louisville.
Yeah. I'm surprised you didn't put them lower, but Virginia is bad right now.
They're bad. They're bad. And I mean, you just have to look at quality. I mean, common opponents between Florida State and Louisville. Florida State absolutely housed BC. It was 44-14. And they played against Louisville. It was a tough game, a game that Louisville lost when Florida State came back. Now, Louisville plays BC. They got 3 sacks on Djokovic, but Djokovic somehow figured out how to get his game back. And other than some really boneheaded, turnovers, was able to take them apart. And Louisville's offense is bad. They don't have anything. I mean, the announcers can make as big of a deal as they want about Malik Cunningham. He trotted out from about 5 yards out 3 times. And that's, if you're BC, you're going to live with that because that's what it is. He's not running for 200 yards against you. But they don't have an offense. Their defense was bad. I watched that game and went, man, Satterfield is done.
Now, for someone who is big on recruiting and you understand the way that world works, how much of him being such a great recruiter factors into your decision making when you're the athletic director, you're the president, and you're saying, okay, but this guy has a lot of people coming in that may not come if he's not the head coach?
Well, I think the world's changed a little bit on that sense. So I don't think it's going to, I talked to Matt McGavick of Fan Nation, who was on my show last week. And he was saying, they have Ruben Owens, who's a 5-star running back, who's one of the highest recruits Louisville's ever gotten. And they have another Pierre Clarkson, I think his name is a quarterback, 4-star. And from what he says is the NIL money that they're going to get is going to make sure that no matter who's the coach, they're coming to Louisville next year. So it doesn't matter who. So I feel like NIL kind of smooth that over. So it doesn't matter if it's Satterfield or if it's some other coach, they'll be there.
That's a good point. All right. Number 2.
My number 2 team is Georgia Tech.
Okay. Yes. Let's go. Yellow Jackets figuring out how to
move it up a little bit. And they showed heart, and I was impressed. I went to bed early that night, and I woke up and went, "What? They beat Pitt?" And then I went, "Yeah, they beat Pitt." And they don't have, the difference between what I gave them and what I gave BC is I think there's more talent on BC to win more games, so they're a little higher for me. But shout out to Georgia Tech for really not folding it up and going out there and beating a top 25 team. I mean, that's a big deal. Will they win any more games on their schedule? Who the heck knows? But now you have like something. You have something to hang your hat on this year when it looked like you had nothing. And that's a positive to the was it Key, the interim coach. He got them together, he got them to play hard, and that's all that you can ask for.
Yeah, I think Brent Key being a former player and really understanding that 404 in Atlanta culture is huge for the Yellow Jackets, especially considering how much they have built that brand to be something good. Like, I'll credit Jeff Collins. He definitely made you excited about wanting to play in Atlanta. But actually, when it comes to X's and O's, maybe he wasn't the best. Excited for Key to see what he can do. And if he really showed, like, they've won a couple more games, you might as well mess around and keep him. Like, it's clear that they want to play for him. And again, it's also clear that they had talent. It never was lack of talent. It was lack of leadership from jump. So that being that. Number one, I'm assuming, is Boston College in terms of teams that are on the lower level but figuring it out.
Yeah, they're up. They moved up. And listen, all I have been talking about with BC fans on Locked On Boston College for the last 3 weeks is Boston College the worst Power 5 team out there right now? And they clearly showed last weekend that they're not. And so that is a positive for BC right now. Well, honestly, baby steps, right? Yeah. They were putrid against Florida State. They made lots of bonehead plays against Louisville, but there were positive steps in the right direction. They kept Djokovic on his feet. I mean, and Zay Flowers had an insane game. They blocked an extra point that ended up being the winner for them. They were able to kind of contain Malik Cunningham, who ran for 150 yards against BC last year, and he only ran for 62 this year.
Yeah,
I know he got hurt, so he didn't play the whole game, but still, there were steps in the right direction. Now, they get to play Clemson this week, and am I naive to say they're going to even have a chance? No. All I can pray for is that Djokovic doesn't die. And so, because that defensive line against the way BC's offensive line has played, even if they've improved, which they have, is a scary, scary thought for Boston College. And, the Clemson defensive line in 2020 separated Djokovic's shoulder in the end of that game. It was a game BC almost won, and that was with a good offensive line. What they're going to do against this offensive line this year, it's going to be.
Here's to hoping that the bandana game gets you a little more,
right?
A little more. Let's just hope, for safety's sake.
There's always weird juju about that, it brings out something with BC, and I don't know, if they're going to have that mystique, and it's a night game at, I don't know. Something can happen, but I'm not counting on it.
This is true. Listen, our partners at Nissan have worked with us to create a new segment across the Locked On College Network titled Thrilling Moments, where they highlight the most exciting play from your favorite schools here in the ACC. Now, you can see it throughout history or your alma mater. This week's thrilling moment from Nissan shall be, crazier things have happened, so we'll get excited about that. I will leave you guys to be more anticipated, but the thrilling moments are an opportunity for this inspiring new designs featured across Nissan's new lineup of vehicles. Pursue what thrills you in the new Frontier, Armada, or Pathfinder today. Available at nissanusa.com. We're rocking and rolling here with AJ Black of Locked On Boston College. We're talking about all things rankings here. Talked about the 5 teams that need a little more help, but there are actually 5 really good teams here in the ACC, and AJ's got them for us here. So number 5, best team in the ACC right now would be?
The number 5 is Duke.
Let's go. Let's go, dude.
I had Duke or Florida State on here, and I debated both. But you know what? At the end of the day, I put Duke because
go with the winner. That's who's winning right now.
Right, they're winning. They played a very good Kansas team to the end, and I like the Noles. And please, fans, don't kill me in the comment section, or kill me if you want to. That's okay. But they've run for 1,100 yards or something like that as a team. Physical, they're playing well. Mike Elko's got them believing. They're a fun team, and when you win, you win. And I'm looking forward to a Duke Clemson ACC championship game.
Listen, as much as people are laughing, I cannot wait to get the last laugh, because not only am I going to get money from both Drizzy Drake and Kenton Gibbs. I'm also going to just be relishing in the fact that everyone doubted me when I said Duke football is going to surprise a lot of people. And it's just very reassuring to know that I was right about
I'm
one
guilty.
team.
I laughed at you when you said that.
Even JJ from Locked On Blue Devils podcast did not believe me when I said the Blue Devils are going to be good. Because once again, I reiterate, guys, sometimes you can talk X's and O's all day, but you can't measure heart. You can't measure talent. You can't measure want to. Those guys wanted to win very badly. I went to all the games, home games last season. They wanted to win. They did not have the right people calling the game to help them do that. That's just point blank, period. And then you also just saw them like give up on when you lose the locker room, it's just time. And that's exactly what happened. But now you have someone who understands, and just being at the game, they have a student section. They didn't have a student, like very basic stuff that like really just changes the energy, right? They had a whole freshman giveaway fan development type thing where they give freshmen $100, $200, $300, $400 for each quarter. So if there was ever money, I would come to the game if I knew I could get $400 if I stayed till the fourth. Are you serious? Like, come on.
Yep.
That's incentive right there. That's beer money, being in college. That's a great incentive to come to games. So whatever works. And Duke got it. So there you have it.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. Number 4
is NC State.
Okay.
They were in it against Clemson. It felt like Clemson kind of controlled that whole game. But they, you look at their quality of wins, they, barely beating East Carolina, holding their own against Texas Tech. Again, the ACC Atlantic is fascinating, and the games within the division are really like must watch. I'm really interested to see their game against Florida State, because that really is going to show me, is NC State a contender? They still in the hunt, or is Florida State that those dudes? You know what I mean? Like, I want to see if they can bounce back after Clemson, because when you play Clemson and you play in Death Valley, I don't have the stats in front of me, but there's always a letdown effect that game after it, because you put so much into getting out there and trying to dethrone the champions that, NC State doesn't have an easy one this weekend. When you have to play Florida State right after Clemson, that is tough. And it's going to show what kind of moxie they have and where they are in comparison to the rest of the ACC. I think it's going to really put the different levels of where this conference is at.
Absolutely. One of the highlighted comments that we had from YouTube from the Clown Town saying, God bless Brother Kenton for rightfully calling out the NC State coaching staff. They waved the white flag right before halftime. And I agree. I think there were opportunities where if you're going to be a Bear, be a Grizzly. You're playing against a really good team, but you're also a really good team. Don't just be satisfied with points or that it's an even score. Try and go out there and run a 2-minute drill. Like, whatever you need to do to give yourself an opportunity to get a momentum shift or quiet that crowd could have been done. But what pisses me off about NC State the most is that I was rooting for them, and y'all all know how hard that is for me to do, being an unbiased person here on the Locked On ACC podcast. So it makes me mad because I was rooting for you guys to be my champions, and it looks like you're going to let me down yet again. But that's fine. It's fine. I knew better than to put all my faith in a Wolfpacker, but I'll live with it. All right, number 3.
So number 3 for me is Syracuse.
Let's go. 5-0.
They're going to stay top 5 until they show me that they don't deserve it. And, that last week, it's basically nothing's changed. They played for Wagner, which doesn't really, it's their FCS team, so they didn't really have to do much. Sean Tucker had 3 more touchdowns. They won 59-0. And then they have a bye week. And then next week, again, like this ACC Atlantic schedule is crazy. They get NC State next week.
Yeah.
So that's going to be another
have a great schedule. Yeah, they're going to have Hutzpah figure it out, because you don't catch a break here in the Atlantic. It's very clear.
Right. And so they're up there until they're undefeated right now. They're 5-0 for a team that, preseason, everyone was talking about Dino Babers being fired. This is going to be easily the worst team in the ACC Atlantic. Who's coach of the year right now? Is it Mike Elko? Is it Dino? It's got to be one of the two.
We love a last laugh, and both of them clearly have that when it comes to their respective teams. Speaking of last laughs, if you guys are putting money down, like I'll be having the last laugh when it comes to Kenton Gibbs and Drizzy Drake. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all of your betting information this season. You can find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game. the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your favorite events this football season, including they have other sports too, though, MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the BetOnline.net website or use your mobile device today to learn more about the games in action. BetOnline is where the game starts. I will say I had an 8-team parlay on the NFL. I would have won nearly $1,000, but the damn Detroit Lions just blew it. And my partner is a Detroit Lions fan, and I was like, okay, they just showing me a little something. I'm gonna give them a little grace. Never again. Never again will you have me put any money down on the Detroit Lions. I learned my lesson. It was a hard one for sure.
I have right now, Candace. My one I'm waiting for is preseason. I put Heisman odds on Hendon Hooker.
There you go. Ooh, that's a good one.
And I if I win, I am in good shape. So that's my big one, and I'm really hoping that my BetOnline ticket cashes in on that one.
Taking the kids to Disney for sure. Love to see it. All right, number 2 team here in the ACC who is ripping and running and doing good things. Who we got?
Wake Forest.
Yeah.
They lost. They lost to Clemson a couple weeks ago, but clearly they showed that they're better than NC State the way that they lost. I mean, you don't want to dissect losses, but they were right there with they were right there with Clemson, and they still, that was close. And then they come right back and they beat Florida State in Florida Tallahassee.
State, yeah. Very key there in Doug, which again, Florida State, you had my vote. We were feeling good about you. I thought they were going to beat Wake Forest because of, Wake coming off the loss and just the way the energy has shifted a little bit for Florida State. But Wake Forest said, no, we got this covered. So kudos to them for sure.
Yeah. And Sam Hartman is either you'd say either DJU or him, or, they're the top 2 quarterbacks in the conference right now. And
Speaking of which, we had a person who gave us an opportunity. Their internet was out, so shout out to Mr. Willie Thomas, who wanted to give us a little insight here. But his good was Sam Hartman. He said he looked like the ACC version of Aaron Rodgers. And since y'all know I'm a Canes fan, he was not going to even expand on our Bad for Monday show talking about Florida State. And he's like, I'm just going to agree, which we appreciate that. It was a little ugly there for the Noles. But I will say once again, Sam Hartman is showing a little bit of what I hope to see from Devin Leary in terms of being the preseason ACC Player of the Year. I'm not sure if that's gotten into his head. It's messing with him a little bit, but it feels like when he was under the radar, he liked that under the radar disrespect a little bit. But now that everyone's like, all right, we think you're the man, he's like, wait a minute, maybe not. Second guessing. Not that he's playing bad, but certainly not of the caliber with which we may have hoped. But speaking of number 1, who is playing a little bit better than we all thought, I'm sure it's still Clemson.
It's still Clemson. and DJU has got 11 touchdowns and 1 interception. If we want to talk about improvement this year, at a position at a key position, he's number 1. You can't. It's hard to argue with anyone else. The DJ has
Cade Club. You thought he was coming.
Everyone thought that. I mean, you saw what you saw last year, and just he looked broken, and he took that criticism and built himself back up, and looks every bit the 5-star wonderkid that everyone thought he was going to be. And he's dangerous. He's the type of quarterback play. The way he's playing right now is a type that's going to get you into the playoffs. It's going to win the ACC and be dangerous. And with that defense out there with him and with Will Shipley, who's playing really well too, the Clemson team is very well rounded and very good.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that ultimately after Saturday, I always love a little challenge. I just figured somebody's going to come in and take the crown. It was just clear and apparent that it's just not right now. Clemson is very much taking their claim, and I don't know who, after especially Wake Forest's 2 overtime loss. I just don't see anybody getting in Clemson's way as it stands after week 5.
There's been teams in the past that have snuck up on them and bit them. Syracuse is one of them. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to say that Syracuse could do it again, but they're playing very well. And they could catch them at the right time to beat them. I don't think BC has a chance. South Carolina doesn't have a chance, but I mean, I just saw on 247, they had a article on who's going to be the first loss for every remaining undefeated team. And Clemson's was none. 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 And And that was their discussion, was that Clemson doesn't have a loss on their schedule left. They're gonna, all signs pointing them going 12-0 and going into the ACC championship game.
Yeah, I just don't see Garrett Schrader against that defense having a good day. I just don't see it. Like, I think Garrett Williams on the defensive side could certainly give DJ fits.
Yep.
But I see Sean Tucker getting swallowed up in that backfield as it stands now. My mind could change tomorrow. That's just the way life goes. But I just don't see. Clemson is just freaking good, and it's annoying because you're like, okay, it's time for a change. No, they're like, all right, hold my beer. I'm not. No change. No, thank you.
Yeah.
But yeah.
You're gonna have DJU, and he's gonna go right to Cape Klubnik in a couple of years, and that dynasty under Dabo Swinney is gonna continue.
He is definitely getting on his Nick Saban vibes of things just rolling. But I will say, as we're wrapping up the show here, talking about the Atlantic Division, you mentioned like 4 out of the 5 teams are clearly in the Atlantic, and I hate for the fact that they won't get the opportunity to have sort of that rematch or meet you in, the ACC championship game. This if there was ever a year to say this is why we don't need divisions, this is that year.
Right. There's no offense to Duke, who's earning it, but who knows? It's so early in the year. They could hit a rough patch. It absolutely could happen with a team like that, right?
Yeah.
They could face a tougher team and they could fall. But in the grand scheme of things, for the ACC, we've talked about it all season long about, money, TV rights, all that stuff. What's going to be the marquee matchup for the ACC? Is it going to be Duke and Clemson? Or is it going to be a rematch, if they can sell it like that, a rematch from that double overtime game between Wake and Clemson? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and that's
Clemson
crazy to think Wake being a money seller, but it is what it is, right?
Yeah, Wake Forest and Florida State were one of the top 10 most watched games, and I'm thinking maybe a lot of that was Florida State fans. But if you look at the number 2 most watched game after Alabama and Arkansas, it was Clemson and NC State. So the staying power is, to me, in the Atlantic Division. So they would be that hot ticket item come December in Charlotte. Everyone would have their eyes glued, and it will be next season. I think there's whoever gets the opportunity. Right now, as it stands, I would say it's going to be 2 Atlantic teams. Crazier things, of course, have happened, but it's going to be must-see TV for sure.
Yeah, and it's been, we've talked about. I think last year, when we talked about the ACC, it was a crapshoot, right? Every team, it was like vulturing. The college conference was vulturing itself. This year, it's all about good play and exciting matchups, and it's not that. It feels like you still end each game with going, you know what, that team's still really good, and that team's going to continue. And it shows like a good what the conference really needs is a really solid bill of health, and this year's showing that. You know what I mean? Like top to bottom, there's bad teams. Obviously, Boston College is one of them, and Louisville's another one. But are they as bad as Colorado? Are they as bad as Vanderbilt? Oh, no, Vanderbilt's not that bad this year, or maybe they are. I don't know. But the bad teams out there, Arizona State, they're not that bad, and so the conference itself is looking much better.
100%. I think that Commissioner Phillips, a part of his speech next season, but what an exciting time that we're doing away with division. Yeah. We got it. We've been here waiting for you. So ready for it, excited about it. AJ Black, it is always a pleasure to have you here on the Readings and Rankings weekly show. Can you please remind these folks of where they can find you, follow all of your work?
Yeah, absolutely. You can follow me on Locked On BC. I am currently working on a video edit of Dabo Swinney running across America. I'm working on it. I'm removing the hill behind him and having him just running.
Love it.
Because the BC fans respect Clemson, but there's a lot of dislike of Dabo amongst our group. So I'll be talking a lot about that. I don't mind him, but
I get it 100%.
And you can follow me on Locked On BC. Subscribe on YouTube if you want to. And I'm also the editor and publisher of 247 Sports, Eagle Insider. We're one of the premier Boston College sites that has great information on the team, recruiting, everything, and a great community of BC fans. So check that out as well.
A man who does it all. Guys, come back tomorrow as we will have Alex Dono talk with us about potential trap game Thursdays. Okay, I can't wait for that show. For Candace Cooper and AJ Black, until next time.